Okay, hello. I'm going to try to explain this little sort of starter project I've made that I'm trying to gather up a bunch of really useful kind of fairly simple, fairly generic, reusable systems for the base of a game. So basically what I've got here is I've got a base scene with a sort of game manager and a menu and stuff in it that works as a pretty good generic setup for just starting a new game jam game or starting a new real game. And then you can have another scene loaded in with your game level in it, or I'll just save that. You can remove that scene, and really you would start the game like this up when you make a build for the player. But I've set it up so that if you want to drag, also the project is sort of set up here. I've got MUZTEK because my game company is called MUZBOZ. So MUZTEK's just kind of this set of technologies for building this stuff, and I'm hoping to update this and maybe tweak it up based on things I learn when I go to make my new game that I'm getting started on. But I've got the base game systems with stuff like an audio mixer in it, this base game prefab, which you could actually really unpack that prefab if you wanted, and then you can pull it apart or do what you want with it. But I thought I'd make it a prefab to start with. A bunch of scripts, and then there's that, and then there's a sort of example game content. So you could literally just sort of hit delete on that and get rid of it if you wanted to, and just keep your sort of bare bones base game system. But this stuff's here to just sort of show how it works. So I've got some animations, some audio, I've got some scriptable objects for these audio cues, which I'll explain, and an example game scene. And so what you can do is it's set up so that you can just open up the game scene in here, and when you press play it kind of detects that there's already a scene open, so it switches from menu mode into the game immediately, so you can quickly just press play. You can be editing your scene, moving things around, hit play, you don't have to go through the menu to do that. It just sort of switches it over. So I will explain all the bits in order now. So let's have a look at what it does. Let's remove that scene. So the base scene, what I still plan to do is some save load stuff, and but I thought I would just get a version out there. So let's hit play. So we've just got a menu scene. Now save and load don't do anything. Quit should quit if you make a build. It doesn't do anything. Options I haven't added yet. I want to add sound sliders next as a sort of a thing. And so basically you've just got a little sort of UI canvas all over here, and a little game splash which is in here in the menu root object. So there's a canvas and stuff in there with your menu buttons and stuff. If you hit play, it'll start playing. Now one thing I've got in here is this sort of procedural music player, this generative music thing. Let's turn that off for a bit. Let's go. Okay, so in the game scene, there's a game scene root, and everything should always go inside that, because when we pause and unpause the game, it goes through everything under game scene root and turns off rigid bodies, it pauses sound players, it pauses particles, it disables all the behaviors like the mono behaviors and stuff. So it pauses and unpauses them. So that's important. You need this game scene root to be called game scene root, and everything should be put under that and parented to it. Like if you instantiate objects or sounds, they have to go under there. So everything has to go under game scene root. So I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but I think I'll be doing it that way. So you can hit resume, or you can just go escape. You can see that these lights are all paused. Now in my pause script, so my main scripts can be found in this base game system. There's game manager, audio manager, they're the main managers actually. Game manager has the pause system in it. which is fairly long, and it also has, like, it records the game state enum. So let's have a look. You've got the game manager, and you can get it as a singleton by going game manager.get from any script, because it's static. So you can call game manager, you can check game manager.get game state, for example, and see whether it is main menu, pause menu, or in-game. This is a big list of all the things that you can pause and unpause when you go to the pause menu. So it'll go through behaviors, particle systems, audio listeners, rigid bodies, nav agents and stuff. So I've got a pretty good setup of that going. I haven't put it to the test in a big game, but seems to be working. This is the little hack that if you detect, when it starts up, if it detects that there's already a game scene root object in the world, then it'll disable the main menu and just get you playing straight away, because you're obviously editing in the editor. That's this function here, and it'll also audio manager.get, which is like get the instance of the singleton, find in-game audio pool parent. That's something else I'll maybe explain later. This is the pause menu stuff. Check for the pause menu, checks for the escape key, toggle the pause menu. If it pauses, it goes through all this stuff and disables lots of things and stores references to them, so that when you unpause, it brings them back. Now at the moment I am doing timescale equals 0, or I think I just call timescale freeze, which is a function I've got. You don't need that on. It actually works fine with it off. So you could have your game sort of stay running in the background if you wanted to customize what it is that you turn on and off. But this is working nicely as a base. It's got the freeze and unfreeze in there at the moment. So it does all that. That's about it for in there. And it's got the quit code, and it's got some buttons. It's also got some menu functions that you can call from your buttons, like when you click play, it does a load scene function. Let's have a look at that here. So play, if you hit play, it calls in the game manager change scene and disable menus. So there's that stuff. So yeah, that's all hooked up basically on game manager. Audio manager is also a singleton. You can go audio manager.get and do things there, like playing some sounds and things. There's also some functionality around the audio mixer, and there's like a structure here around mixer groups, and referencing the mixer groups, and also being able to call a coroutine set track fader to change the volume over a few seconds, or whatever you want to do there. There's also an audio pool system, which you don't really have to use, but you can. The audio pool system spawns a bunch of objects, as many as you sort of want in your pool, whether that's 32 or 40 or 100 or whatever you want. By default, they will be set up inside the menu audio pool here, which is kind of a child of the audio manager. These are all the sound source pool items here, but I've made it so that if you play them, each time if you do use the audio manager play sound or play cue, I've actually got a custom scriptable object type called an audio cue, which is, let me show you an audio cue first up. Where are they? They're in the game content. So I've got these ones, like, what I did is I made a little generative music cue. So it's an audio cue, which is a collection of clips. These are all little just notes I played on the guitar in the E major scale, and they will be chosen at random. I've got loud ones and quiet ones. So the loud ones will be between this volume. I made a little sort of custom editor script where you've got these handles on these sliders. So there's a min-max value for the volume and a min-max value for the pitch. I've left all of them at 1 because they're all in E major, so they need to all be at pitch 1. Spatial blend, this is fully 2D, this is fully 3D. So these are 2D sounds for this generative music audio cues that I have. And I've got loud ones and quiet ones because what I do in my generative music script is I have a audio clip repeater script which just keeps playing a clip each time a timer counts down. So I've got one sort of, it's like a waltz, so every 1.5 seconds it'll play a random one from the loud audio cue set, and every 0.5 of a second, so three times as often as that one, it'll play a quiet cue from the quiet audio cue set. So they're actually the same, except that I've just got a different volume on them. They've got the same notes in them, the same sounds in them and stuff. So that is what's going on if I hit escape again. And you can see them appearing under the game scene root under Systems in-game audio pool. You could potentially put that somewhere else, but the script defines it does on-scene load if you're in the in-game game state. It searches for this object and gets a reference to it in the audio manager, so that whenever it plays a new sound, it goes, if we're in the in-game state, move the pool item to there, so that when I pause the game, these all pause because they're under the game scene root. If they were all still up here in the audio manager's pool, these ones just keep playing. So that's not what you want if you want them to be in. So you have to be able to differentiate if you're going to use the audio pooling system, whether you're playing them in the game scene or playing them in the menu. So let's go back in again. So as you can see, pausing it totally pauses these clips and resumes them as needed. And as you can see, this pool, if I stop it, there's actually nothing in that pool to begin with. So let's hit play and let's pause it. So let's go like this a bit. As those cues are playing, it pulls them out of here each time one starts up and pops them in here. So have a look. If I stop that script, these are the audio script examples. There's a little generative music example and a script that just changes the music volume over a few seconds, so you can see how that works. So if I stop them, you can see them all finish up and become inactive and available again. If I start them up again, see them getting used. It's kind of weird. The blue ones look active and the grey ones look inactive, but it's actually the other way around. So the grey ones are the active ones. So let's stop that. Let's turn that off because we've had a look at that. So now, as you can see, I can't edit my game scene at the moment because I'm in the base scene. So let's drop the game scene back in so we can play around with that. And as you can see, we can just hit play and we'll bypass, because it detects that this game scene root object is already in there when it starts. It just goes, no worries, you're obviously trying to work in the scene, so it gets rid of the menu and you can run around. Now I've got this little player character down here. I've got a little basic sort of stealth game happening just so I could test all these systems. So these balls, you can't actually push them around. I haven't worked on the player controller that much. They bounce around and sometimes you can nudge them out if you get sort of stuck in a corner. Let's just start it again. As you can see, they're rigid bodies, and if I hit escape, they all pause, they all resume. So I'm pausing and storing their velocities and things, and then resuming their velocities and things when I unpause. So now with those gems, I'm not even using the pooling system on them. I'm just going like, there's a sound source on the player or something, and I just say when I touch it and pick it up, record that I got another gem, and just go like audio source dot play sound and give it the clip. So I'm just doing it the stock standard way for them. There's no need to use the pool if you want, but I wanted to understand the pooling system So I put that in there. So these Navmesh agents have an AI script, and they will see you, and if you pause it, they get paused properly and store various properties so that they remember sort of what they were doing, and when you unpause it, they get unpaused without any jitters or slowdowns. They don't stop and start again. They get properly paused and unpaused. I guess it should be noted, I'm kind of planning to just share this project around for anyone to use and learn from and use the scripts and take them, and if you want to build a game with it you can, if you want to just pull bits out of it you can. I got really frustrated that you can get started building a game, but it's pretty hard to know how to sort of structure and architect the base elements that well, and I still have a bit of more territory to cover and figure out, like the saving and loading. I still need to, I think when I go over my save load system and figure out how to do that properly, like I want to be able to fully quick save and quick load the game state of, say, like this little stealth demo, and then shut down the game, load it up again, hit load, and I want it to perfectly load me into the game because I want to know how to do that. The process of doing that will probably involve reworking some of the sorts of things that are in there now. So I think I'm just going to upload this little video that explains how it works. Explain that I think I'd probably call this version 1.0, and I think I'm planning to upload a zip of the Unity project with a version number and like the video associated with it, and the video will always link to the download for that project. And if I update the project, I might make another video or do another release, but I'll keep the other releases in case someone just wanted this one and doesn't care about whatever mess I make. Like if the save load system comes in and makes the project more complicated, then in some ways you might want this one, this older version instead, because it's a bit simpler. Like even some of this audio pooling and stuff you might just not want in there. So I kind of want it to be a bit of a bare bones version, but if I improve it then I'd like to update it as well. Now what else do we need to cover? So yeah, so options doesn't do anything yet, but I want to add a nice slider system that adjusts the volume in a nice sort of smooth way. Save and load I'm hoping to do something with later, and quit should work now, although to be honest I actually haven't even built this yet and tested it all properly, but we'll see. So resume, that's all working nicely. Pause. So what else do we need to explain? I guess the main things to understand are, yes, you can edit a scene, but you really should have this game scene root empty, just like create an empty game object in a scene. Go game scene root. I think it needs to all be capitalized and everything like that. And put everything under it, because the pause system looks for that and then goes through every game object under it to pause and unpause it. So it doesn't pause and unpause the menu. Now that's what we need to talk about. So what we've got in the menu is, let's leave the game scene in there so that it's something to see. Let's pretend it's sort of paused. So the default here is I've got all these icons, or obviously they're under, the buttons are all under menu buttons. We've got play, blah 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 blah. And if you go into the pause menu, it activates resume instead of play, and it deactivates the play button. So I've got a 2D background scrim, which is just like a semi-opaque grey backer. So that's in there, and that works fine, and I had that in there because I wanted to make sure I could see that the game was pausing behind it. If you wanted to, you could make that totally opaque and you know, feel like you're safely away from the game here to just make a simple system if you want, but by default I'm going to leave it like that, I think. Now if you turn that off, I've also provided the example of I mean basically what I'm going to talk about is, one of the easy ways to pause the game is to go time.timescale equals 0 and just pause time. But what I'm trying to do here is do it so I don't really have to do that. One issue I did find with time scale is if you call in your game invoke repeating, that will keep repeating the invocation of a method. Even if you disable that object, disable the components on it, like disable the scripts that call that, it just keeps going. So I think timescale maybe stops that from happening. But what I'd suggest is probably just trying not to use invoke repeating, and I actually changed my generative music system to just use a timer instead of invoke repeating, because that controls properly when you just disable the behaviors. They no longer keep playing sounds. So that was an interesting lesson to learn. But along those lines, there's a bunch of different things you can do using scaled time or unscaled time, which you might want to use in your menu, and you can do it with animators, you can do it with scripts. So I'll show you some examples of those. So by default, let's actually go back to the game manager, and when we do the pause system, let's go like this. Let's go freeze time up here. Now if I turn this off and then go unfreeze, we'll turn this off. So in pause, we won't be freezing time or unfreezing time. Time scale, normal like delta time, will still be running all the time. So let's have a look. Let's go minimize. So recompile. So what I've got going on here is let's just turn that scrim back on for now. Let's go 2D background scrim, turn that on. Let's go play. Now let's have a look. Okay, we've got our generative music thing happening. Let's close down this pool. So the game's working right, and we've got this thing's animating with an animator. This thing's animating with a script using scaled time, as is this and this and this, the gems. These guys also use scaled time. So if I pause it, I'm not pausing scaled time. What I'm doing is the gems usually use this object rotator, but it goes through all the behaviors and finds them and turns them off. See, if I turn that on, you'll see this gem is animating because time is not frozen in my world. Delta time is still passing, but the particles have been frozen, the scripts are all disabled, blah 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 blah. So that means that you can still use time scale if you want, but what you can also do is in this pause menu, even if see, the thing is, you might want to use slow motion in your game or something, and you may also want things in the background to maybe keep animating, even like particles or something. So I'm just trying to keep it as open as possible, I guess, and not just use the whole freeze time scale. So what am I trying to show you? What I've also got in the menu system up here in the base game is menu scene 3D elements. So this is an example of what you might have for a 3D menu, and this might be a menu where, let's turn the 2D one off. Okay, so you might have a 3D menu with a scene in it or something, and in this example we've also got 3D background elements, which is like a ground and a wall. So let's turn them on. So say you were totally in this, if you actually look at the scene, what it is it's a separate camera with this separate stuff to look at, which is, I've just put it over to the side a little bit so it's not overlapping the scene, but you can't actually see the scene stuff with this camera. So that's another topic. But so we're looking at this, and then the reason why this is still working is because this object, it has this radar cone with an animator, which is using, you can actually pick any animator, even if it's using the same animation as my same radar in the game. I've got the same animation playing, but the animator on this one is using unscaled time. Now it actually doesn't matter what I use, because I haven't frozen this object, because it's not under the game scene root object. It's in this whole menu scene, and I don't go through these and pause them and unpause them. But even if you set time scale down to whatever, or you know, your game scene might be in slow-mo mode and you've set time scale to 0.2 or something. But when you hit pause, you can actually just leave that at 0.2, but everything's frozen by disabling elements of the script of the objects. And this would still run on its own thing because it's running with an animator using unscaled time. So depending on what you want to do, you just got to be aware of how those things work, which is what I've kind of been getting my head around doing all this stuff. Now this gem is another example, just of another example of sort of how you can manage some of these things. This one uses an object rotator, but I've got a object rotator unscaled script. And that script just uses unscaled delta time to rotate this object. So I just set how I want it to rotate around X, Y, Z, and then tell it to rotate around X, Y, Z. But I multiply it by unscaled delta time. Now, my gems in the game, the gems that you pick up, they use object rotator, which is exactly the same, but it uses time.delta time. So I've just written two different versions of the script. Sort of to show that there's two different ways you can do it, and even if I want to freeze time in my pause menu, which you can do that by just toggling it on and off in here too. In Game Manager, you could we've turned it off, but you could turn freezing and unfreezing time on if you want. But these will still work because they use unscaled delta time. Now, the other thing is, let's just try to clean this up a little bit. So say, let's turn this 3D background, the ground and the wall, off. Okay, so we can see both scenes now. Now, actually, let's turn them back on. Now, the issue I was having is I have a camera for the menu, and I've set the layer to menu scenes, which is a layer I've added, menu scenes, and this stuff is all on, everything in here is on menu scenes, and it means that I can select the camera and for the culling mask, now hang on, I'm getting a bit confused. I'm not rendering default. Yeah, so if I render default, I will see parts of the level over there. Now, I'm not sure if this may get a bit messy once you have more layers and maybe there's things that you want to render in. Like, I guess a more difficult case for pause menus is if you have a menu in here and it sort of is loaded in the same scene as your game scene, but this is actually some quite big vista over a city or something, and you've got volumetric light, and you've got you've got an ocean in there, and you've got characters walking around, and then suddenly you want to be able to go to the pause menu and have all that on there, then you're going to need to make sure that your menu camera is only seeing its culling mask is, say, not seeing the default stuff, so that this character over here, this guy with a guard with a light and stuff, you want them to go away. So let's turn off default. Now, they are totally separate scenes, and I've also done the same with the game camera. The game camera, oh, that's weird. Huh, I haven't said that. The game camera shouldn't be rendering the menu scenes, so I should actually change that. But I guess because the game camera is sort of over here. Well, I guess we're never seeing the view. The game camera is actually seeing the wrong thing. You can see it there. It can see this big wall. Now, why isn't that more of a problem, actually? So that, see, if I don't have the 3D background on, why isn't the game camera actually seeing more stuff? Well, I guess they're just not quite interfering. Like, I would think that if I moved this thing, if I moved the radar tower down into the level, I think I'd be able to see it in the game camera as well. Yeah, see? So that's bad. You can see it jumping around down here in the level. So I should set that game camera to not see the menu scene as well, like this. Now I'm tripping myself over. Shouldn't the menu scene be seeing that thing though? Yeah, I've mixed myself up. I think it just got mixed up because let's go menu scene and then go escape, escape. Yeah. So it was mixed up somehow because it was paused. Anyway, no matter. So what else was I going to say about this? So yeah, that's using an unscaled time animator. That's using an unscaled time script. Now there was something else about that. I guess the camera stuff. Something else I found, and really the easier way to do this is just to like use a 2D pause menu and bring this up fully opaque, and then you'll just find that don't have anything in the scene for the menu, just have a basic thing like this, and that'll be easier. Otherwise, I'm not sure of the most elegant solution to have like a 3D menu scene and a 3D game scene. But I basically do have it set up so that that's working. Let's put this back. So what I was going to say was, if you do have your 3D scene, yeah, you also have to be careful with lights. So if you have lights on the guards, so these guards spotlights, these guys all have lights, and they've also got a culling mask, and it's sort of like the same sort of thing. If you put on menu scene, then you'll find that when you're on the menu, you can see those lights shining across and affecting things, so you don't want to have that either. So if you have, there we go, you can see the guard here shining across. So even though the camera is not, the menu camera is not seeing the level, the light sort of has its own rules and it's shining onto that wall. And so we're not seeing the level there, but we're seeing the light there. So you do need to, you need to be sort of organized about, these guard lights all need to not be affecting the menu scene layer. So, these complexities basically all come in if you're dealing with a 3D scene. If you're not, then life's a bit simpler with how you run your menu, and you could basically go like, oh no, I don't have a 3D scene, and you can actually turn off this menu scene 3D elements thing or delete it altogether and go, you know what, I'm going to go with the simple menu, turn on the 2D scrim again, and just maybe even put a nice image back there or whatever, turn the alpha up full and go, yep, that's my scene. We go resume, we're zooming around, can pick up a gem, can hit pause, and we're paused, and you probably don't really have to think too much about the cameras or the lights or whatever. You can replace this, you can replace the whole background, you can replace buttons. So I've also got, you can turn off that generative music example thing that I was playing with. I'll leave that in as a little example of how you can use those though. I should, we did have a look at these, didn't we? Oh yeah, now we'll have a separate look at that later. So you can also turn on, there's just a simple music player. So if you turn that on, it's in the menu scene, so it just plays all the time. It doesn't pause, which is kind of the example of it is for, let's show you from the start. So if we remove this scene, I might save it, I think that's alright. So we've just got the base game. Let's turn on the simple music player. Actually, let's bring the scene back in and turn off the generative music thing. Let's go save. Let's remove that. So if we hit play, so the music kicks in straight away. Simple music player. All it is a play on awake little music clip from a Tambo, a band of mine from the past. You can hit play. No interruption, the music keeps playing because it's a persistent object. You can pause, the game's paused but the music still goes. So you could have a separate script if you wanted to. You could write your own, music manager or whatever, and it could basically just work, operate up in this base game scene mode, and you know, play different tracks when different events happen, like maybe coming in and out of scenes or whatever. And they can keep, basically, I guess this base scene with this base game root object is set up to be a persistent thing that exists during the entire session you play the game, and you'd have a save and load manager and stuff in that game manager as well, I suppose. And you can load and unload again these various scenes. Also worth noting, there's the game scene root where everything should be inside it in your game scene, and if you're going to spawn particles or spawn sounds, you should spawn them underneath that object. So you just want to parent everything to that. A good way to do that, which I haven't really done yet, would be maybe just have a reference to game scene root in the game manager, and whenever you spawn an object, you do your normal instantiate and get and say, you know, parent equals game manager dot get dot game scene root, which is like a, you know, have a transform reference to the game scene root and parent things to it whenever you spawn them. I'll probably play with that in future. What else was I gonna say just now? Yeah, so you could write your own music thing. Let's have a quick look at these. So I've written a scriptable object called audio cue, and it lets you drop in an array of clips, and you can set these. So let's have a look at one, because the thing I haven't mentioned is that there's a preview button. So let's look at let's duplicate this, because then I'll get rid of it. So this is like, it's called let's call it guitar notes randomized pitches. So these are just, we're just going to make weird pitch variations. So we can change this pitch to really, really low and really high, and let's just have them fairly quiet. You can actually also just grab the middle of this bar and move the entire min and max value at the same time. Let's go like this, and you can just hit preview. So that's a good way to just quickly, you might have a few explosions, and you're going, oh, I want to hear what that sounds like, and you're like, okay, I think maybe it'd be better if it was just a little bit of pitch variation between here and here, and make it a bit louder, and you can be testing them without having to even play the game. Obviously, it'll sound different in the game if you've got them as fully 3D sounds with this spatial blend turned up full, but you'll still get the idea, based on, in fact, they still play in here as a 2D sound, I guess, because they get played at volume 1 when you hit preview. So, yep, there's that. Let's get rid of that yucky random guitar sound. Cool, so that's basically it. So as I said, you might want to unpack this prefab, because otherwise if you start making changes to this, like moving the order of a game object, it'll give you that warning like, oh, you've got to change the prefab, you'll need to open. So you might just want to unpack that and then do whatever you want with it. There's not much point in it being a prefab in a way, because this scene just gets loaded and is always loaded. So it's not like you need to necessarily load it up as a prefab when you're changing level or something. So that's basically it. There's various code to look around if you want, but half of it's just, this is just a gem, pick up the gem thing, enemy controller, player controller, a level manager that just sort of says like there's 4 gems. When you pick up them all, it shows a debug log saying that you've won the game. There's not a lot to look at there really. Some prefabs from the game. So that stuff's not that unusual. So if we close down game content and just look at base game again, there is also, that's the custom editor for the audio cue. That just means that you can have the preview sound button and the sliders there, and they actually rely on a few other little custom scripts, which I think I put in utils. So there's the min-max range attribute, which is like a little custom thing, and a ranged float and a ranged float drawer. So they're all used as part of defining these min-max range and drawing these in the editor. and in the actual editor script here, audio cue editor, that's just the telling you about being able to press the preview button. What else is there? So scenes, that's the base scene. Audio manager, game manager. I think we've looked at everything. So yeah, it's not too complicated, and if you stick to the 2D sort of menu, there's not even too much to think about with those cameras and culling masks and stuff, which probably keeps things a bit simpler. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good structure, but I'll know more once I start to use it, and also expand on various systems like putting the options in, and maybe getting a basic save load system down so that I understand that, and if I feel like I've come up with a pretty good template for how to do it, then I might do another release and incorporate that too. Partly because I think I wouldn't want to set all this up again like every time I make a game. It's kind of boring. Most of it, I guess, once it works, is like, well, it works. Like, why would I do it really any differently? You'd probably want to largely do it the same, and then maybe tweak it from there. Some of it is a little complicated, like the audio manager it's got a pooling system. It's got this mixer system. Now, we actually didn't look at that, did we? I wanted to understand the audio mixer, so I've got this master mixer, which is actually in a resources folder, which it may not need to be, but I thought I just wanted to make sure it gets loaded in with the build and everything. The audio manager here has a reference to the mixer, and it's also got this max sounds, which is to do with how many audio pool objects it'll make. You could make that number higher if you want. And it gets a reference to the menu audio pool for where to parent them to. It'll drop all your little audio source in there, and when you're in game in a level, it gets a reference to the folder. See, it can't get it to begin with because that scene's not loaded, but when the scene does load, it gets a reference to the in-game audio pool parent object, so that it can move them into the appropriate place as it uses them. But yeah, when it actually plays a sound, there's some complexity here to it because it's using the audio groups. Let's go to the audio mixer here. So this is the audio mixer, and I wanted to set it up with the master and then some different mixer groups: music, UI, and world. So world is just everything that happens in the game, like the player or NPCs talking or jumping or swords or whatever. UI is just button clicks and things, and I actually don't really use those at the moment. I think I'm using just music, but I'm going to expand on that a little bit when I put in the options sliders. I'm going to make sure that you can adjust main and then music, UI, and world, I think. Yep, I mean, that it'll depend on the game a little bit, but I want to put in some sort of a good template that works for those. And I'll probably save them to player prefs, but I'll do for save and load. I'd try to use JSON or XML or something else. At which point I could maybe save this into JSON or XML as well, potentially, but I might just use player prefs to begin with as a sort of a nice template. So there's that. Something else worth noting is that the pause system makes the assumption that you've got menu root object and it has a reference to that and turns it on and off. So I think you'll see the game manager actually lives on the menu system object. This could potentially be called game manager if you wanted it to be. And it has a reference to menu root object for activating and deactivating that when you go into the game. And it also has a reference to the play and resume button because it swaps them over once you're in the game. Because when you go to the pause menu, you want to see resume instead of play. So yeah, there are some assumptions around needing menu root object and the game scene root. I can't remember if there's any more. I mean, you do also need this in-game audio pool object to exist at the moment. I think I'll write some code so that when that sort of first starts up in a game scene, it'll check that that exists, and if it doesn't, it'll make it. But the fact that I'm currently forcing you to need this game scene root object for the whole pause system to work anyway, I figure, well, how about I just also assume make the assumption that you need to have these objects in here as well for the pooling to work. Otherwise there'll probably be a null reference exception at the moment. I haven't really written even the proper error checking around it. So yeah, I'll zip it up and I'll link to it, and I think it's working pretty well at the moment. I wouldn't really call it even a 1.0 release. It's a, I don't know what, a 0.11 release or something, you know. But yeah, I think look, if I could have got my hands on this, then I think it's quite valuable. Although obviously you do need to understand how it's set up and what the assumptions are. So that's the purpose of this video. So hopefully that made sense, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.